Here is one of a series of talks by spiritual leader Lola McDowell Lee, spanning 2 decades from the early 70s through the 90s. Lola was a Zen Roshi, whose Rinzai lineage included Dr. Henry Platov and renowned Zen master Shigetsu Sasaki. Lola was a religious scholar as well as an ordained Christian minister. While the talks are focused mainly on Zen and Buddhism, Lola drew on many spiritual traditions, including those of Jesus, Plato, Lao Tzu, the Hindu Vedas, Meister Eckhart, and Gurdjieff.
Anyway, tomorrow's your last morning. So whatever time you have left to sit tonight, make use of it. I mean, with a long sit, then things get geared up within one and it becomes very important. Sitting for a long stretch of time is a big help. We're going to do a little bitty thing here out of the agamas tonight, and the agamas are these are the first teachings that the Buddha gave, and so they're considered the source of all the teaching that he ever gave. And I'm just going to read a little bit here so you know something has preceded this. At that time, Mahakashapa and Shariputra were both practicing the customary noon meditation under some trees which were not far distant. When Shariputra realized that the heretic monks had departed, and so he went to visit Mahakashapa. They saluted each other and exchanged inquiries about each other's health. It's very interesting they do that. I mean, like with the Kogetsu Roshi, the minute you start talking to him, he inquires about your health. What's his name over there at Mio Shinji? This Matamura, the little guy with the glasses. Mariguchi-san. First thing, inquire about your health. The second thing, out come the pictures. And so this is the case also in India. You meet somebody and the first thing you ask is, how's your health? And everybody smiles, they're smiling, that's showing your teeth. And then they say, fine, regardless. Yeah. Anyway, then Shariputra withdrew to one side, and having seated himself, gave Mahakashapa an account of the discussion he had held with the heretic monks. See, they had come to see him. O Mahakashapa, for what cause and for what reason has Lokanatha never said one word on the point whether the Tathagata has life and death in the future, whether he has no life and death in the future, whether he has both a future and no future, or whether he has neither future nor no future? Mahakashapa answered Shariputra, if Tathagata had said, the Tathagata has life and death in the future, he would have acknowledged the rupa. Rupa, as you remember from the other day, is the physical appearance. Rupa is body, physical appearance, body, form, shape, stuff like that, color. He would have acknowledged the rupa, the physical appearance. If he had said that he had no life and death, he would have acknowledged the rupa. If he had said that he has both a future and no future, he would have acknowledged the rupa. Or if he had said that he has neither future nor no future, he would have acknowledged the rupa or this physical appearance. This is a few sentences out of the Samyukta Agama. There's 4 agamas. And it's, as I said, one of the oldest, it is the oldest of the Buddhist scripture. It was put together about 200 years, they think, before the birth of the Christ, which would make it about 300 years after the death of the Buddha. Put together. Buddha lived 500 years before. And these, up until that time, these words had been transmitted orally from teacher to disciple. According, which was the custom in those days. Teacher told you what the teacher thought you were capable of understanding, and they used the scriptures to quote them. And also, they had this feeling that it was a sacrilege to write anything down. That what they heard should be taken into the heart and remembered, so that, again, it could be passed along to another student, because they didn't all have the means of writing anything down, and not everybody knew how to write, and not everybody knew how to read. And we must remember, too, that what was written in those days was mostly on palm leaves, leaves of trees. Now, if your mind is very clear, you can take something into the heart and remember it exactly. If there is the slightest little wave of discrimination, if there is any, I wonder if this is true, any proing, any conning, I agree, I don't agree, any discrimination at all, then you will only remember the part that you have interpreted, that is discriminated. And some of that may be because it's now your interpretation and not what has dropped into the heart directly. It's your interpretation. You won't even remember that very long. Once in a while, something really hits home. That you remember. But how are you going to remember a whole scripture? Verse upon verse upon verse. Some of these verses are very long. And to me, it's really very interesting. It has been interesting for a long time. I used to listen to it when Vivian was around. People would say, he said thus and thus and thus and so. And I had heard the same thing, and I thought, they're crazy. He never said anything like that at all. Not at all. And now I hear the same thing here. Lola said so and so and so and so. And I said, I did? And then I find out what they're talking about, and they're not talking what I said at all. It's simply their interpretation. And I think maybe I just better shut up. Anyway, it was about 200 to 300 years after the death of the Buddha that these agamas were transcribed from what they call the vernacular, from, into this Sanskrit and this Pali. And they are basically now used in the Hinayana sect, the Theravada small vehicle, who still are trying to keep what the Buddha said intact as what the Buddha said. because this is the basis, this is the foundation. Hinayana is the foundation, so here's where we find the agamas. And the whole story, very shortly, is that some monks came to see the Buddha. And these monks were they were Jain monks. And from the Buddhist point of view, these monks were considered heretic. They must have been considered heretic all over India because they did not follow the Vedas. And of course, this is one reason they finally decided that Buddhism didn't fit in India and why it died out of India, because it too didn't follow the Vedas. It didn't have the Vedas as the background. But the Jains had this, that there was no God, that any divinity that dwells in the soul of a human. They had the founder of the Jains was called Mahavira, and that anyone who wanted to be liberated did so through right belief, right knowledge, and right action, which included you couldn't kill anything. And India has been big on this anyway. You can't kill anything. I mean, no ants, no insects, no flies, no centipedes, no scorpions, nothing like that could you kill. And then they divided too. It's very interesting. They had the people in the Jains who were liberated and became their teachers were called Tirthankas. And they were at one time, they became divided. And the southern Jains never wore any clothes, and the northern Jains did, or vice versa. But anyway, after the 24th Tirthanka, there has never been another one. But the guy, the man that is the head of it now, they had a thing about him on television last year somewhere, and they showed him walking through India, and he didn't wear anything. Very strong, positive man. Okay, and they're considered heretics by the Buddhists, and as I said before, by the rest of India also. But anyway, these Jain monks came to visit the Buddha and to ask him a question. And it had to do, they wanted to know about his future life and death. Because they wanted to compare it, with their Tirthanka's ideas of life and death and the hereafter. Huh? And the question that they asked was, has Tathagata a future life after death? Or has he no future life after death? Has he either a future life after death or no future life after his death? Has he neither a future life nor no future life after his death? This is called Hindu logic. When a Hindu asks a question, he puts it in 4 ways. Yes, no, either yes or no, or neither yes or no. So that it's a question with 4 bases. He's very well covered. I mean, the whole thing then is within this framework. We do differently. We say yes or we say no. We've got an either-or situation, which leaves a lot of room for slippages, for other people's interpretations. This has got the four bases. Yes, no, either, neither. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Because, if you just look at either or, it's either this or it's that. It's black or it's white. It's either yes or it's no. Then you go along with the situation, and a lot of what you think about it is mere speculation, because there's a couple other bases that are not covered yet. That's either or neither. So when you look at it this way, you stand back and there's four corners to the thing, and all is in between that is covered by yes and no and either and neither. You look at that and you wonder, what do you really know? What do you really know? So I think it's time we got down to some nitty-gritties. What do you really know? I don't know anything about that. Now, the Buddha answered this question. To all of the four versions of this question, last night we used the word quietude. He answered it with his thundering silence. That's about all you could call his silence. There is this, in this Nag Hammadi library, these books that they found out there in the desert. There's a poem in there. This is all these Gnostic books, leaves, pamphlets. And one of them is entitled Thunder, Perfect Mind. I've read it to you before. This perfect mind silent, but it thunders. It's not a mute. It is a thundering mind. And this is called silence. Yeah, sure you know. Now, this kind of a silence in Sanskrit has a name. We name everything. Avyakrita, it's called. There's this yak in there, which is means word. So this is no description or no word. Avyakrita. There's no word, but this silence speaks. This silence thunders. This silence imparts something. So when the Buddha is sitting there with this thundering mind, he is speaking eloquently. It is, this man is sitting there expressing his understanding. With a thundering mind and not opening his mouth. See? It's not non-description, but there's no word. You can say no word if you want, but no. But this avyakrita, this thundering silence, as they say somewhere over there in India, all the gods and the goddesses, all sentient beings, cats and dogs and trees and weeds, understand this silence. It is the state. It is a state of the word that was existing before the first word. There was something existing before the first word. They say that the first word was ah. And they say the last word was ha. Now this is silence exists before the first word and exists after the last word. It is, Jesus came when he came and he said, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end. So this is before Alpha and after Omega. This silence. This no word. No word. So this state, this silence, they say, is omnipresent. It is everywhere. Therefore, it is in you. Its power is omnipotent. That is, unlimited. So they call it Almighty. Its wisdom is omniscient. This infinite awareness and this infinite understanding and this infinite clarity, this silence. Thunders. Now, Buddhists will tell you that one enters Buddhism, the Buddhistic faith, through this gate, the experiencing of this silence. After a poor little cat. One enters the gate of the Buddhistic faith through this silence. Get back to business here. And one attains enlightenment by the practice of this silence, which is in you, and it is called meditation. So this, what is called avyakrita, the reality of it, this no word is a great word. It's like the word love. It represents tremendous power. represents a tremendous power. And the word silence represents a tremendous power. It's palpable, it's living power. With each of these, and others, there are still others, each of these you must experience. It must be a living experience of a living power, dynamic power. It's the power that is. It's the power that passeth all understanding, each of them. Then when you can say, when you have experienced this will, then you can say willpower and you won't be lying. Or you can say silence and you won't be lying. Or you can say love and you won't be lying. When you know that power itself, which is what it is. Now, when we come together like this, and I'm sitting here, before I open my mouth to say anything to you, in that split little second before I do, all of you and I simultaneously make a complete unity in that Avyakrita. You learn to pick it up. So, the Buddha, these heretics come with these questions, and the Buddha sits there in this silence. And these Jain monks, they look at each other, this guy's not saying anything. And, like a lot of people in religion, it's all for show. And so they say to themselves, but this guy's an idiot. He's really a fool. He's like a baby that he's got no understanding. He has no enlightenment. And so they leave. So they start to leave altogether, and they see Shariputra sitting under the tree there, so they turn around and they go back. And they sit down and inquire after Shariputra's health. How are you? Did you have something to eat today? Of course, I guess the Jain monk's not too much interested in eating. But, and pretty soon comes up with this thing, and they ask him the same questions. And Shariputra answers them in the same way. He was a pretty tremendous man. And they left him. Well, here's another idiot. What's the matter with this outfit? And nobody says anything. And so Shariputra's sitting under the tree there after a while, and he sees Mahakashapa come out of something, and Mahakashapa sits down under a tree. Now, of course, Mahakashapa is a giant among these disciples. And so he goes over and greets Mahakashapa, and he goes around and sits down on one side of him. So now they're both sitting under the tree here. And then he brings up the subject, and Mahakashapa and Shariputra discuss the situation. Interesting that, huh? It's very interesting to me. And I wonder how much, and I'm sure I brought this up the other night. In fact, I know I brought it up the other night. Mahakashapa. There's 500 monks. And in the custom of those days, They bare the right shoulder and they kneel on one knee. And then they're there, while the Buddha talks. I mean, if you watch the Tibetans, they still do it this way. They bare one shoulder and they're down on one knee. And here are these 500 monks. And here sits a Buddha with this flower. And after a while, Mahakashyapa smiles. So he knows what this is all about. And so he became the Buddha's successor. What do you suppose he saw? Here's this root stem flower, this lotus thing. Here sits this man with this flower. 500 monks. And they're all sitting there, all kneeling there, looking at this flower. Looking at this flower. The only thing is this doesn't have any roots. I remember one time when Vipan came to town and he said, Lola, you go out and get me a lotus flower, root and all. Common sense in Escondido, you can get a lotus flower, root and all. Well, I think Rosalind finally came up with one. And Vivan looked at him and he says, past his prime, isn't it? Oh, dear. And he used to say, here's this root that's in the mud, and here's this stem that's still in the mud and the water, but here's this tremendously beautiful flower that grows out of the water. That's not what the Buddha was after, believe me. Anyway, what all these questions have reference to, they're emphasizing the 5 skandhas. If the Buddha had said that there was a future life, or that there is no future life, or there is either a future life or no future life, or there is neither a future life nor no future life, his answer would have come from his acceptance of the 5 skandhas. And the 5 skandhas, as we know, are rupa, vedana, samnya, samskara, and vijnana. Let me know when. Rupa is the physical appearance, that which seems to appear before you. Seems. It is a seeming appearance, because in actuality it is what you have projected through the mechanism here. The seeming appearance is the sound and the shape and the form and the color. Which reminds me, I think maybe I will do again the abstracting process. It's been 10 years. By now you've forgotten. We'll do it. The Vedana are the sense perceptions. This is this mirror upon which the rupa reflects. Samya is the feeling. We laugh and we cry and we think and so on. And in the Buddhistic literature, it is called something like a coarse mind, concrete mind. Mind sometimes is very concrete, and sometimes it's very fine. That is, it's more abstract. Anyway. Reasoning, That's the outer mind. Then samskara is the finer mind, sometimes called the subconscious mind. And at the very core, at the base of everything, is this vijnana, which we call consciousness. Now, the Buddhist religion speaks a great deal of these 5 skandhas. So when you go like that and you feel your fingers, why do you feel your fingers like that? They're very interesting. The Buddhist religion talks a lot about the skandhas. However, the Buddhist religion is not based on these skandhas. It talks about them, but is not based on them. The Buddha used the skandhas to make the foundation of Buddhism very clear. He did this with several other things too, like he used reincarnation and transmigration and so on. They are not the foundation of his religion, his presentation. They are actually not the foundation of any religion. This is something we promulgate because we don't understand. Buddha wanted to clarify thinking in religion. It is the religion of Buddhism, is a religion of the everlasting light, just like Christianity is. They speak of everlasting light. And in his book, The Eremite, which is the hermit, Dr. Plavoff, he called the Buddha a one who had a Gnostic view, that he saw noetically. Now, the literal meaning of the Sanskrit term, word skandha, is shoulder. It's a shoulder. It means to stack one on top of the other. It's like the neck is stacked on the shoulders and the head is stacked on the neck. So you're all kind of stacked together. The shin bones are stacked on the ankle bones are stacked on the feet bones, and the knees are stacked on the shin bones, and the thigh bones are stacked on the knee bones, on the shin bones, on the ankle bones, on the feet bones. There's that song like that. Don't you remember the song? Sure you do. What's his name used to play that? The fellow with the orchestra and the big chorus. Who? No. The nice one. Fred Waring. Exactly. Man, they really did that. Wonderful. Okay. Now, this stacking business. The basis of the human mind. Now, and we're differentiating with words here for a moment, because we're talking. There's nature's mind, universal mind, and human mind. We're talking, How else, how else are you going to know what I'm thinking? Unless I try to differentiate a little bit here. Human mind, huh? The foundation of human mind is consciousness, right? Yeah. So consciousness is likened to a mirror. Everything is in it. this are the seeds. The seeds, like seeds in the earth in the wintertime. Vijnana. Seeds in consciousness. We have many references to this in the so-called esoteric tradition. Dion Fortune's Order of the Golden Dawn, and old-time theosophy, and things like that, you know. They had this simile, you know, this Francis Rigardi wrote a book, you know, about the pomegranates. All these seeds. And also in Buddhism and in Christianity, you know, we find that there is the fig tree, the tree on which these seeds grow, the figs, because they're full of seeds, you know. If you've ever eaten a fig, full of seeds. And the Bodhi tree, the bow tree, is a fig tree. It's a banyan tree, which is a type of a fig tree, under which the Bodhi sat, you know, for however many years, whatever the legend is. I mean, they use this for a reason. And Jesus saw Nathaniel under the sycamine tree, and that, of course, too, is a form of a fig tree. No? So all these seeds are contained in a fig or a pomegranate. And these seeds in the figs and in the pomegranate and in the consciousness react according to circumstances. You know, when the wind blows into a room and it's warm and the temperature of the air rises, this is circumstances. Okay? So, with situations that come along, circumstances that come and go, consciousness reacts, and the seeds, certain ones, are responsive to certain situations, not to others. And the ones that are responsive, they spring forth. And then you wonder why you act like you do. These are in your consciousness. The seeds of all your ancestors. Latent seeds. Maybe a certain circumstance will never come about that whereby certain seeds will respond. You can call it karma if you want, but it comes with this body. The seeds of all your ancestors. Circumstances, situations come about, and consciousness reacts, responds, and so the seeds burst forth. And then you say, but this is not me. Oh no, well it isn't in a way, huh? It's something you have been carrying, and some things you carry, as I say, and they never develop. Circumstances come about, and things develop. Yeah? Consciousness is a very interesting phenomenon. Consciousness moves, round, and it flickers like a candle flame, you know, and the breeze comes along. It's too far away from me. Breeze comes along, and it moves, it responds. It changes its shape a little bit. So, and I often tell you that when you're sitting, you should hold consciousness as a focus of attention, like a candle flame, and never allow it to flicker. That means you're not responding to anything, and the senses are all shut down for that moment. You give them a little rest. It won't hurt them any. This is this very still, shining, non-moving flame. It responds, it flickers. You don't allow it to flicker. You keep yourself so steady. Because, you see, it's like the consciousness in you is a living, vibrating energy. It moves quicker than the eye can follow. This is electricity-like, this pure consciousness. Of course, we've got all kinds of things in our consciousness, so it's like this river, that's full of logs and twigs and leaves, and if you go to Bangkok, it's got dead pigs in it and dead cows in it and dead fish and cats and dogs, the whole works, maybe people. But even that, there's still pure water. This pure, electric-like energy, pure and shining, becomes involved in forms of emotion, in forms of balance, in forms of crystallizations, forms of shapes because of the crystallizations, like trees, that the branches. So, and here is this human mind. Front, it has a front and a back. And the mind is always trying in its thinking to maintain a balance. It may be moved this way by emotions and thinkings, and then it is moved that way, and it's always the effort to pull it back. If you watch yourself through the day, you can see this pulling this way and pulling this way, and then trying to make it balance in the center. See, this discrimination pulls it this way, this discrimination pulls it that way, trying very hard to come back to a balance. When you hear good things about yourself, it's kind of like there is this smooth rising within you like a piece of velvet. Yeah. And when somebody sneers at you, well, you get kind of frightened, and you're rather taken aback. And you have a tendency to sneer in return. And there is this rasping sensation that arises. Yeah. With either rising, either this smoothness or this rasping, it appears to the mind as reasoning. And in some ways it even appears logical. We can argue ourselves into logic about it, and in some ways, this is the development of the human mind. This is what shapes it. The mind shapes, Well, this is the mind. Then comes the five senses, the hearing and the smelling and the tasting and the touching and the seeing. And with that, the crystallization of this consciousness is somewhat complete. As a tree has the branches and the leaves and the blossoms, and we're talking now about this shoulder of Vedana. And then here, of course, we having the senses. Why, there is this rupa, this body. It's hard and it's soft and it's red and it's brown and and it's all composed of the same substance, the same material. It's consciousness, crystallized. That bell. If I touch it, it seems to me to be hard, like this. It's hard. Huh? But if my hand were as hard as a diamond, this would be soft to my touch. There is not really, in actuality, any hardness or softness. Particularly, there is no particular hardness or softness. Everything is relative. The hardness of this is relative to the softness of my hand. And so with your discrimination of good and bad. And then colors. We have colors that go along with form and shape. The eye gives us color. No special color exists. All color depends upon the frequency of the energy as it impinges on the eye. But because it does impinge upon the eye, and thereby creating a color in us, which we project, consciousness creates what is called an outer world. And where was I hearing this the other day? That somebody was quoting something of the Buddhist thing about we create the world right along with the Buddha. Well, with our seeing and hearing and touching and smelling and tasting, we are creating a world right along with the Buddha world. I hope you can see that, and I hope you can understand that. The seeming world of appearances, our so-called out there world, is our creation, so to speak. Not that we know we're doing it, but it is because of this mechanism. And all human beings have consciousness, objective self-consciousness, so we could say a similar state of consciousness, and so we all see similarly. Little variations on the theme, but by and large the same. And so we are in the process of creating a similar world. Right? Okay. Then what happens? The outer world, as it were, coming into the inner mind, as this image, like a photograph. And they say, they use the word stains. It colors the mind, the consciousness. It colors or stains this pure consciousness with color. the human mind makes this contact with what is here, we have this response to it or this reaction to it, and we make up a name. We call things good, bad, indifferent, pure, impure, human, animal, plant, rock, or God. We put them all in categories. So the outer, as it were, seeps into or soaks into the inner. And the pure mind, and using St. Paul's word, is now we have corruption. The mind is corrupted. The mind is shaped. And Henry would have said, so we live with a deluded mind. It is a stained mind, a colored mind. And without our even knowing it, we live in delusion and we constantly deceive ourselves. Because we are not alert to what is going on. Now, everything that is in existence has its own particular manner. That is, it has its own way. I mean, we are all here as human beings. We are all states of objective self-consciousness, so we should all be the same, but we're not. We all have our own manner, and we have our own way. And we do this, we have our own way, according, to, of course, to these seeds, and to the place where we find ourselves. A willow tree, let us say, that grows by the water becomes like the water. It willows. You put a willow tree someplace else and it doesn't willow quite as much. But by the water it willows and sweeps the water, and it is so pleasant. So it has a samskara of water. Water shape moves like water. Water nature. The pine tree grows with rocks. So they call it stone-minded. Its nature is like a stone, and a pine tree acts like a stone. Towers there. So a human being also changes his nature or her nature according to the nature of circumstance. See, so these 5 skandhas, I'm still talking about them, they do 2 things. They rise, they emerge, they go out. They flow out, and then they take in. And both they're rising and flowing out, and they're taking in changes the nature, the mind of a human being. See, now here comes a lot of shoulder business, because as a human being, according to his nature now, looks out there, flows out there, and takes in, and changes. And the changes are on top of what is already present. And then he flows out, takes in, and changes. We've got piling, stacking. Once you accept something as valid, you will file other things on top of that concept. You stack them in there, and you go out and you bring it in, but your psyche is discriminates, just like the eye does. There's a blind spot in your eye. And that's why you keep blinking and looking back and forth. Otherwise you will not see what is before you. There's a little blind spot that leaves out part of it. The psyche does the same thing. So it discriminates. Once you accept something as valid, you stack other stuff on top of that concept. But things will be that you stack in there and that you see will be in accordance with what you have already accepted. Everything else is thrown out. Sometimes it takes a very great jolt to allow us to see anything else. I'm sorry to lay this on you as the thing goes. This is the need for going back to the basic innocence. This is the need, if you want to know, to get rid of the concepts that you have, so they don't have so much of a hold of you, so they keep taking in the same stuff over and over and piling it and piling it and piling it until you now don't even recognize the first concept that you accepted. Okay. There are times in all of this machinations where we need a little respite from ourselves. Yeah. And the simplest method to have a respite from yourself is to find a yet deeper place. It's not to go off on a vacation because you're still taking all this crap. Sorry, I'm talking for tape. You can't sell these tapes out to anybody in the group. You're right. You reach down, you push down into yourself to a place where no word can reach, where there is no sound, where there is no color. You move down out of the realm of the five skandhas. As long as you're just sitting there in the five skandhas, you will not be free from anguish. You know, there is a way out of the anguish. There is an end to the anguish. Okay? The body, its tendencies, the desires, the feelings, and the thinkings. We agonize in all of these ways, many ways. But deep within each of us, where there is no sound, no color, out of the reach of the thinking mind, where there is neither past, nor present, nor future. It's beyond space, beyond time. It is ageless. It is boundless. It is immeasurable. No one can see it. No one can imagine it. But it is. It is. Now. In meditation, you will come to see that there is a state that has nothing to do with this body or the five senses. With our consciousness, you know, consciousness is self-consciousness, comes into existence when we come into existence. And when it comes in, and so when it's going to go when our existence ends. This is this kind of consciousness, huh? Meditation is a life and death matter. The state beyond consciousness is not life or death. It is. It is spoken of as nirvana. Nirvana, near is a negation. You know, it's like a wiping out. You know, and then under the term saguna Brahm is, yes, this God has qualities, and we endow this God with qualities. We give it. We give it. We created this God. We created him in our image. Therefore, we could endow him with all kinds of things. But there is this nirguna Brahm, no quality God. See? Saguna, you can think about him as much as you want. Nirguna, you can't think about. There's no qualities to think about. See, it's wiped out. So nirvana is wiped out. It's blown out. If you're blown out, how do you think? You don't. Huh? No. What can you do with a no-color, no-sound world in which you can't think? Huh? Concepts don't help anything. You can't make them up. Huh? You can't say this is good and this is bad, and I want this and I don't want that. All these discriminations don't exist. You know, all for this great big me that is blown out. But there is not life and death. Now this Tathagata, whom they called the Buddha, Tatha means that, meaning the original essence of this body. Not this form, not this shape, not this color, not this sound, but the essence thereof. What this body originally is, and it is that now. Some people say, well, it's Akasha. Well, okay, that's fine, except you just got another word and you can't tell me what that word is. Because if you could tell me what the essence here, now, is. See? These are the crazy things we do with our heads. Tathagata, he comes, he goes, but he's always that essence. He came thusly, thusly he goes, thusly come. He came in his original essence. He remains in his original essence. Why make something else out of it? There is no life and death to it. It is unborn. It is undying. The one whose rupa has been completely annihilated is the phraseology. And this word annihilated makes a lot of trouble. People think I'm annihilated, means when the life leaves the body and the body is lying there and it's cremated and it's reduced to ashes. Don't look at it that way. His body has been completely annihilated, means that his concept, his notion, his idea that this body, this physical body, has been completely annihilated. The concept of it has been annihilated. This body is what it has always been, the original essence. It is this original essence that appears to the eye as shape and form. And we call it body. And so we have all these concepts that are piled one on top of the other. It is essence. This body. This body, as you're looking at me now, exists to the eye, exists only to the five senses. We could say this body consists of fire, water, air, and earth, the four great elements, huh? But basically, still one element. It is the essence. And no one knows what that is. And I explained that to you already, didn't I? You're in a no sound, no color world. You can't think and you can't have a concept. So how are you going to know what it is that way? That knowing, you can't talk about. You can't think that knowing. So the Tathagata is the one whose rupa, that is the seeming appearance, has been completely annihilated. His idea, his concepts about the shape and form and sound and color, whose mind has attained perfect emancipation, whose mind is fathomless, boundless, ageless, and dwells in nirvana. Dwells in nirvana. The state of absolute annihilation. The seeming contradiction of all of that, huh? It's a very positive statement. It's not at all negative. It is very positive. The whole world is in nirvana. The whole world is completely annihilated. And this has nothing to do with the meaning of death. Right now, right here, we are all in nirvana. Wake up and look at it! Yeah. So maybe in the morning you could tell me what nirvana looks like. Either that, or if you want something easier, why, you could tell me about Mahakashapa and what he saw. Okay? I hope you had a good week. And I hope to see you in the morning and on Sunday morning. Okay?
If you find Lola's talks valuable, more will be posted in weeks to come.